My name is Larry Kessler, and it's my pleasure to introduce two people from the U.S. FDA Center for Devices and Radiological Health. And they're going to talk about various features about getting technologies through the regulatory system. You've heard a lot about new discoveries and things that are going on. You heard from Moni this morning, for example. She mentioned two products, the Ellipsis and Wavelink, and they, of course, had to go through the FDA processes. One went through the 510K process, the other de novo, so they're kind of interesting ways of going through the FDA. And knowing what you need to do to get through it and what's going to matter is actually quite important in advancing technologies in the United States. So it's my pleasure first to introduce Gema Gonzalez. I am fortunate enough to actually work with Gema when I was at the FDA, and she's a biomedical engineer, and in one of the more both patient-centered and friendly and technology and company-friendly parts of the FDA. They're very, very collaborative. So I'm going to turn it over to Gema to talk first, and then I'll introduce Janine after that. Gema?
Thank you so much for the introduction, Larry. It's very nice to see you again, even virtually. And thank you so much for the organizers for the kind invitation. I love this meeting. We've participated many times before, and although virtually this year, I'm happy to participate again. And you're right, a lot of the questions that we get, one of the more popular questions that we get from manufacturers and sponsors and innovators such as yourselves is, how do we interact with FDA? What's the best way to approach FDA and get information and get questions answered? And so today I'm just going to give a general overview of some of the interactions that we have, the programs that we have available. So that you can come. We always encourage interaction, especially as you're developing your devices and your products. It really makes us, it's a good idea to get us involved in the process, no matter how early you are or what stage. It really is a good idea to be part of the process and be able to advise so that your experience going through the FDA regulation is as positive as possible. Just to I have nothing to report, no conflicts, and all the information I'm providing is publicly facing, of course, so you can always find that information. So we have, today I'm going to talk to you about the pre-submission program, and I come from the Renal and Transplant Devices team in CDRH, and that's the team where the pre-market and post-market work relating to dialysis products takes place. So this is the team that you would come to ask your questions and to submit your pre-submissions. And I'm going to talk just high level about the pre-submission program. My colleague, Jenny Purcell, will speak after me to talk about human factors is one of the more important or very important aspects of device validation. And so it's one of the topics that we often see in pre-submissions. But just as a general introduction, I'd like to go through some of the pre-subs that different types of submissions that you can use. I'll spend most of my time talking about pre-subs, pre-submissions. We call them pre-subs or Q-subs to get a Q number. But we also have other types of interactions, such as submission issue requests. I'll talk a little bit about those. Study risk determinations are determinations to decide whether a clinical study is significant risk and needs an IDE or not. We have informational meetings. I'll talk a little bit about those as well. Day 100 meetings for PMA, so it's a little more specific. Agreement and determination meetings. The breakthrough program we've spoken about in the past, and I'll mention it also. And then we have other things such as accessory classification requests for accessories of larger systems. So what is a pre-submission? It's really an opportunity to come to FDA and ask us questions and interact and have a discussion about your device. And again, we welcome pre-subs at any stage of the development of the device. It's voluntary. It's not something that you're required to submit, but it does help, I think, to bring and start the communication at any stage. It does require a formal application in terms of submitting something, putting a package together and submitting it to our document control center. It's not just an email that you submit, but it is not formal in the way of a marketing application. We're not going to render a decision with a pre-sub. It's just a discussion. FDA will provide feedback. We'll always provide written feedback, but also you can request a meeting. And then the whole process is documented with meeting minutes. So the pre-subs are used, like I said, at any time, but especially if you're preparing an application to FDA, such as an investigational device exemption application, an IDE for a clinical study. you might have questions on, as you're putting that IDE together, or when you're preparing a marketing application, such as a 510K or a PMA, an HDE, which is a humanitarian device exemption, or a de novo. A previous speaker spoke about de novos as well. And so we do have a whole number of submissions that come about. And if you're not sure what kind of submission you need to use, a pre-sub is a good way to have that discussion. So the topics, regulatory pathway, as I mentioned, and we do have a more formal regulatory pathway question, which is the 513G, and that just refers to the section of the Medical Devices Act. But that will determine whether your device is class 1, 2, or 3. Some people choose to go that formal route. But if you just have general questions on regulatory pathway, if it's a 510K, perhaps you have questions on the predicate device, which is the device you're comparing yourself to. A pre-sub is really a good mechanism for that. You might have questions about intended use and indications for use. And again, if you're doing a 510K and you're comparing to that predicate device, the indications for use is going to be very important. And then, of course, questions about the bench testing, preclinical and clinical testing. You can submit test protocols for us to review, and we can provide feedback on them. Or if you're planning a clinical study, you can ask questions about the patient population and sample size and endpoints and design of the study. And of course, software validation, other types of bench testing, human factors testing, as I mentioned, that Ms. Purcell will talk about, and labeling. And so when you're submitting or you're putting together your pre-submission, what should you include? Well, of course, we need to have some information on your device and yourself as the project that you're leading. We need to have enough information so that we can have and be able to give you as complete and accurate feedback as possible. So if you have any testing information, any validation, supporting information for your device, that would be appreciated. And of course, it really depends on the stage where you are with your device development. You can request the type of feedback that you'd like. If you just want written feedback, we can provide that. If you want a meeting, we can set up a meeting as well. And then you provide specific questions for us to answer and review. As I mentioned, you can choose written feedback, and we'll give you the written feedback. I believe for a pre-sub, the time frame for that is 75 days. Or 70 days to get a written feedback. If you are choosing a meeting, or if you'd like to have a meeting, then we also provide written feedback 5 calendar days before the meeting. And that's so that when we walk into the meeting, you already have that information from us. You already have some of the answers to your questions, and that will facilitate the discussion at the meeting. Our feedback, of course, is going to be based on the information provided in the pre-sub. So we'll just review the information that you have, and that's why as much information as can be provided, we'll do the review and give you as accurate feedback as possible and answer your questions. If we have additional comments, we'll include them as well, even if it's beyond the questions that you've asked. And so we'll give you as complete a feedback as possible. And of course, our recommendations are just that. They're recommendations. They're not binding to you, but they're only applicable to the information that was provided. So if you, in the process of your device development, later on change your device design or change your indications for use or labeling claims, then our feedback might not be applicable anymore. Just keep that in mind. And as I mentioned, the pre-subs are just a way to have the discussion. It does not really guarantee approval or clearance, and we won't be rendering a marketing decision during a pre-sub. If you're having a meeting, then just a couple of things to keep in mind. Oftentimes, the sponsor will propose several meeting dates, and we'll interact with you to schedule and come to an agreement on the meeting date that fits everyone in the team. It's important to know who you're bringing. You can confirm your attendees as it gets closer, but it's important to know who we should bring in our team to provide a full review. An agenda, of course, and then presentation. As you come up with your slides, you can share them with us, and that way we can be prepared for the meeting. As far as the meeting itself, just some considerations. We do keep the meetings to 1 hour. In some cases, we're able to go beyond an hour, but it's really on a case by case. Typically, it's just a 1 hour meeting. And you are free to present your slides and go through your presentation, but we do ask that you leave enough time for discussion because that's the most important thing that we want to get to. We ask that you submit meeting minutes after the meeting, so you can take, you should be taking detailed notes during the meeting so that you can put together the minutes. And that's, again, as for clarifications, you will have had the FDA feedback, and so you can ask for clarifications, you can get into discussions. Again, we won't be clearing or approving the device during a pre-sub, and also we won't be able to entertain new questions. You can, if you have new ideas, you can sort of discuss them, but we won't be able to provide feedback on new questions or new things that are being presented. And then after the meeting, as I mentioned, we will have meeting minutes. You will need to submit the meeting minutes within 15 calendar days. So it's important to have those notes. We'll review the minutes. We actually have 30 days. It's also sort of a formal process for that. We have 30 days to review. And if everything's fine, we'll accept the meeting minutes. If not, we might have revisions to send to you. And then there's another process to get into interactively if there are disagreements on those meeting minutes until we find a final version. So basically, that's in a nutshell, that's what the pre-subs are about. And we really encourage you to come and talk to us, especially as you're planning submissions coming up. It really does help for the review team to know what's coming up and what testing you're doing. If we can advise you on testing ahead of time, it's really a good idea. And just to mention quickly, there were a couple of other types of pre-subs. One specific one is a submission issue request, like SIR, and that's really pertaining to existing submissions. So if you have an IDE that you've submitted and we sent you a letter, approval, disapproval, or if you have a marketing application and we sent you a whole letter with questions, then this is a way to come to us and ask for clarifications, to get into a discussion. We won't pre-review data and information, but we can have certainly discussions on the issues. So you can submit it anytime after the decision letter or the whole letter is sent. If you submit the SIR within 60 days of that letter, then the review clock is fairly quick. It's 21 days. Otherwise, it's going to be 70 days because we do need to have extra time to refamiliarize with ourselves with the issues. And again, just as a pre-sub, you can request written feedback or we can have a meeting, but it tends to be very interactive. We also have informational meetings, and those are very informal. Those are the more informal types of pre-subs. It's basically your way to come to us and show your device, show your project, give us your plans, introduce us to your team. So there's no feedback that's provided at that point. Although if we do see some things, we'll get into a discussion about it. But it really is a good way to introduce FDA to the device and for you to get to know FDA as well. So it's typically done in preparation for a pre-sub, and that's, of course, in preparation for another application. I talked a little bit about the breakthrough device designation requests. Those are also under the program and they get a Q number, but they're very different. There's a guidance document to talk about breakthrough and to run through the criteria that need to be met in order to qualify for a breakthrough. And really, it's a program for a lot of innovators, such as yourselves, have taken advantage of it and submitted for a breakthrough designation. We have 60 days to do the review. We go through the criteria. You provide your justifications. It tends to be a very interactive review, and then by day 60, we'll issue a granting or denial decision. So. Again, in preparation for a breakthrough designation request, you can submit a pre-sub. But the breakthrough designation request will also get a Q number. And that's, in a nutshell, very high-level review of the pre-subs that we have. There is a guidance document. I want to send you the information if you want to go and look for that guidance document. It'll have more information on the pre-sub and the timeframes and all that information. And of course, if you have specific questions, you can contact me in the Renal and Transplant Devices team. Happy to answer any questions and start a conversation about your device. And now I believe Janine Purcell will be speaking to us about human factors. And human factors is one of those topics that comes to us in pre-subs all the time. The human factors validation of devices in the space is very important, especially devices that are going home with patients. So I appreciate that Ms. Purcell will give us some information about that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Gema.